I'm Yolanda Carrington, and welcome to Independent Voices. Today we will feature an interview with activist Stan Goff and a talk of media and democracy in the Middle East. We will also explore the controversy of the recent publication of newspaper cartoons in Denmark, a story on a recent award for Code Pink, North Carolina, and a brief report on a media training workshop held by the Common Sense Foundation. On September 30, 2005, the Danish newspaper Islamophobia published cartoons mocking the Prophet Muhammad. The publication of these cartoons has led to huge protests in many Muslim countries. Independent Voices spoke to Carl Ernst, a professor of religious studies at UNC Chapel Hill, to talk about freedom of speech, hate speech, and racism against Muslims.
The reason why Muslims are offended and outraged is because these are insulting. They are meant to depict the Prophet Muhammad and Islam in general as based on terrorism and violence. And I think Muslims are in a very vulnerable and sensitive position on this issue. I mean, of course, one cannot deny that there are groups that advocate violence in the name of Islam. However, the problem here is what I would call European racism. And I think one of the things we have to realize is that Denmark is one of the countries that has experienced a large degree of immigration in recent years, and 25 years ago there were no Muslims in Denmark. The Queen of Denmark has gone on record publicly as saying that Islam should be opposed. The newspaper that published these articles is associated with a right-wing political group which is in the government, which advocates the restriction of immigration. And so this is not simply an innocent statement about freedom of the press. This is actually a statement of racism that's very similar to classical European anti-Semitism directed at Jews and coming from the very same kind of people.
We are aware that there are laws against denying that the Holocaust took place. And there are also laws against using Nazi propaganda or symbols. So those appear to be a abridgment of free speech. So why is it that those things should be protected, but insults against Islam apparently are the field day, and everyone can take a shot at it? So that is an issue. I think also there is, in addition to the problem of the class status of the European Muslims who are in France, Germany, and Britain, many of them are in the laboring classes and are living in more isolated ghetto-type conditions, just as the Jews were 150 years ago. So, but in addition, this takes on a kind of a global aspect, because the Danish Muslim leaders who were trying to protest this back in September had no luck in Denmark. The Prime Minister would not meet with them. So they took the cartoons around to different Arab and Muslim countries, and actually it's interesting to see that they apparently added some more cartoons that were not originally published. So I think that they're...
The Muslim leaders?
Exactly, yeah. So their intention was to, in fact, kind of get publicity for it, and they were throwing some fuel onto the fire themselves. So I don't think that anyone is blameless in this situation. And so some of the governments are actually quite happy to have a situation that they can attack and cry foul about in Europe. Because, to be honest, you know, the Egyptian government, which has recently been having very flawed elections, it's calling off the next elections. They've had some serious problems in their own governing of the country. And so it's frankly to the advantage of the Egyptian government if everyone is in the streets protesting against the Europeans, because it takes their minds off of the local issues. And I think we're seeing that in different countries it's taking on a very local aspect. So in Pakistan, I was just there last week, it's clear that the Islamic parties are taking use of this incident to protest the policies of General Musharraf, whom they accuse of being a tool of the West. So this kind of thing is taking on a life of its own, both on the part of those who are promoting these cartoons and reprinting them, as well as among some of the protesters.
Last year, we saw an incident of hate speech against Arabs when Julian Vance, a journalist with the Daily Tar Heel, published an op-ed titled, "It's Sad, but Racial Profiling is Necessary for Our Safety," in the Daily Tar Heel, a UNC Chapel Hill student publication. The journalist was later fired for unprofessional reporting.
I guess she really did mean it. So it really offended me. I was really upset. It really shook me up. How do people really feel that way? And I bet you if, she was put under those circumstances that she wants to make sure that all Arabs are put under, I don't think she would like it.
Somewhere between 50 and 80% of Arab Americans are Christians because of a large immigration in the early part of the 20th century.
Well, growing up in the Middle East, which I didn't, but if you did, you would know that Arabs range from what you would call African American here in the United States all the way to what you would call white Caucasian. You have all those different colors in the Middle East, and they're all Arab. You can go to Sudan and find someone who looks, black, and you can go to Egypt and find someone who looks white. So the definition of Arab is very, very wide. You can have Arabs who are Muslim, who are Jewish, and who are Christian. So you cannot generalize about what is Arab because it's very broad.
It's completely inaccurate to say that all Muslims are Arabs. It's only about 18%, so that's a factual problem of considerable magnitude. And of course, to say that all Muslims are terrorists is, people saying this kind of thing would never repeat racial stereotypes about Jews or blacks, or at least not in public. Yet somehow they feel that it is perfectly legitimate to slander, hundreds of millions of people on the basis of the actions of a small minority. And I think that this is uncivilized behavior, frankly.
Stan Goff served as an infantryman, airborne ranger, and as a master sergeant of the elite Special Forces and Delta Forces units. His tour of duties took him to Vietnam, El Salvador, Guatemala, Panama, Somalia, and Haiti. Today, Goff is one of the fiercest critics of U.S. militarism and empire. Along with his own military experience, he has utilized groundbreaking analyses from feminist theory, systems theory, and Marxism to uncover the roots of U.S. militarism. His writings have appeared in Counterpunch.org, Adbusters Magazine, Z-Mag, Democracy Now!, and other progressive and leftist publications. We interviewed Stan Goff this past January to talk about his upcoming book, Sex and War, and his organizing with military families and Hurricane Katrina survivors for the upcoming Veterans and Survivors March for Peace and Justice, held from March 14th to March 19th, 2006. All right. Thank you for sitting down with us, Mr. Goff. What compelled you to write Sex and War?
Everywhere I turned in looking at the question of militarism and sort of reflecting that back from my own experience, interrogate my own experience about what were my motivations to go in the military? What were the things that kept me in the military? What were some of the things that made, even though I had a lot of bad experiences in the military, some of those experiences were places where, I gained a lot of, public esteem. Everybody loved Green Berets. And gender kept coming up over and over again. The whole question of masculinity. And the thing is, once you start looking at it, it's like, damn. This was the elephant in the living room nobody's talking about. And so the next question that occurred to me in thinking about that was, how come nobody's talking about this? How come nobody's talking about, constructions of masculinity and organized violence? There really is a division of labor and a division of power between men and women, again, that does not confine itself inside the boundaries that are defined by, class in the Marxian idiom or class in the popular idiom or race or nationality. The existence of male power over women is, I would say, virtually universal. And it's structural. And in some ways, it even relates to the means of production, which would make it a class system inside using a Marxian idiom. But a class is a systematic division of power in society. Now, it doesn't exist because of biological sex. It doesn't exist because there are men and women. It's a construction that's imposed on women by men, but not by men in a conspiratorial way. It's structured into the society.
How is the movement going to connect Katrina to the war in Iraq and imperialism as a whole? And why? This is another thing. Why are these connections important for people?
And one of the things that was most interesting was, when FEMA, couldn't find its ass with a radar because they had some guy who was a horse show coordinator put in charge of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The Cuban government, and Cubans know a lot about hurricanes.
Yes.
They get hit with them like every year, like clockwork. Cubans are very smart about hurricanes, so smart in fact that they have the lowest number of fatalities of just about anybody because they're very, extremely well organized to handle hurricanes, and they also have, a per capita rate of about one physician for every 200 people on the island. So the Cubans got a lot of people who are very smart about hurricanes and a lot of doctors. After Katrina hit, the Cubans said, we've got 1,500 doctors who've done this kind of work in the field. They have entire medical kits that are specifically designed to deal with post-hurricane situations that they could carry like in an Alice pack, in a backpack. So these are like like the ideal sort of emergency docs. 1,500 trained physicians that were ready to go out there and like establish a clinic and a tool shed. Okay, and the people who were affected by it were not given a voice in the decision about whether these doctors would come. Washington, D.C. made the decision for them. That's a colonial relationship.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? That's an imperial relationship. Of course, one reason that we're taking the Veterans for Peace and the Iraq Veterans Against the War, Military Families Speak Out, Gold Star. Now, that whole group around the Bring Them Home Now campaign is organizing the March in March. We're doing a veteran-led Veterans and Hurricane Survivors March starting on March 14th at Mobile, Alabama. Then we're going to walk 135 miles in 5 days and end up on the anniversary of the war, March 19th, in New Orleans. Because, we want to make that connection, and there's people down there, you know what they call the area along Highway 90 in the Gulf Coast right now? I talked to 3 different people independently, and you know how they described it? Baghdad. They said it looks like Baghdad down here. How much clearer can that connection get? They got people living in tents down there still, and we get this study recently that shows that the actual social cost of this war over time are going to be 2.65 trillion, 12 zeros, dollars. As a friend of mine, Paul Robinson from down in Mobile, said, we can send people over there and build cities in the desert almost overnight, and we can't reunite families in the Gulf Coast of the United States and send them back to their rightful homes. And not only we're not reuniting them and trying to send them back, we're in there trying to, bulldoze their homes and steal their land.
Yes.
So we can take these gentrifying ass developers in there and take, a black city like New Orleans and turn it into an African-American Disney theme park where actual black people can't afford to live there. Now, they'll be happy to bring them back in to act as, cooks and maids and shit, right?
Yes.
but I'm sorry, but this is nice property down here, and, I want to build a nice, I want to build my little second home you know, in the Big Easy.
You have described yourself as an anti-imperialist, as opposed to anti-war. And my main thing is, why is this difference important for people to understand? Like, if they call themselves anti-war activists, because we got to stop this war, Iraq, or we had to stop Vietnam. But what makes the question of being an anti-imperialist as opposed to an anti-war activist important for you?
I mean, I put that out there because I just want people to have total disclosure. I mean, people know my politics, or people know me know my politics, and you know, I'm a little left of John Kerry, I think. So, you know, we went through Vietnam, and then when we finished with Vietnam, you know, we got complacent after about 15, 20 years and said, you know, they're doing a lot of bad stuff right now, but at least they're not taking a whole generation and throwing them into something like this. Because we really didn't think that they would do that to another generation. And they did. And so now we're having to ask, you know, the hard question is not just how do you stop this war, but what do you got to do? What do you got to do to your society so that it doesn't keep doing the same thing over? How do we stop wars? How do we stop wars? Not this war. How do we stop war? And when you start asking that question, you know, then you're asking the first question that gets you through the door of asking about, you know, how the world is structured. What is it that reproduces these situations where we organize violence on this scale? So, you know, that's part of building for the next phase of the struggle, because the social struggle we're in right now to stop the war is part of, or at least it's a ramp up to the larger social struggle that has to happen to transform society in a way that we begin to confront the whole question of war altogether and connect it to its roots in things like racism and economic exploitation. That was King's great triplets. Dr. King talked about, you know, the great triplets of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism.
Last year, approximately 8,000 people gathered in Fayetteville, North Carolina to protest the second anniversary of the war in Iraq. That protest was organized by Military Families Speak Out, Gold Star Families for Peace, and Veterans for Peace. This year, organizers are planning a march and rally to mark the third anniversary of the war in Iraq. The protest in Fayetteville will kick off a week of decentralized actions across the country to protest wars and occupations. Rami Corey is editor-at-large of a Lebanese newspaper, The Daily Star. He spoke at NC State University about media and democracy in the Middle East.
Al Jazeera provided a phenomenon which had never existed before, which is a level playing field where Arabs and Muslims could compete on an even playing field with the United States. And it was in the field of television news. Very simple. Those of you who are in the news business know that, you know, we try to make believe it's more complicated than it is, but it's really very simple. You get a reporter out there and you report about something and tell a story, show the facts as they are, and you get a bunch of talking heads and you get them to argue and talk about something and let them entertain and perhaps educate their audience. Well, the fact is, Jazeera did this in a manner that scared the daylights, I think, out of the United States, because it provided an intellectual and a political playing field where we could compete with the United States. And when the Gulf War in Iraq happened, and the post-9/11 events, first the post-9/11 events, say the Americans in Afghanistan, and then the Iraq War events, there was suddenly an Arab television station that showed the other picture and showed it to the whole world in real time. So you could see when the Americans bombed a neighborhood in Baghdad, you saw the American view on CNN and BBC and whatever, and then you turned on Jazeera and you saw where the bombs fell, which of course the American TV didn't show you. But the Arab TV did show you. So you could see the little Iraqi kids with their feet and their heads blown off, and the wedding parties in the desert where the people were killed, and most recently in Pakistan where a family of 12 or whatever were killed by American bombs. You saw what was the consequence of American foreign policy and military policy. And this provided a new phenomenon which the United States was unable to deal with in professional media terms, and I think in political and just basic human terms. The United States didn't know how to deal with an Arab people who were not acquiescing and bowing down to American power, or just complaining to the UN, or pleading for the Americans and the Europeans to please treat us fairly and be equal. Here you had self-assertive Arabs who were fighting back, using the same tools as the United States was using, which was professional media. So when the U.S. starts a public diplomacy program to try to explain to us American policy, it's adding insult to injury. It's got a racist element to it too, which is saying that those people over there, there's something wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with our American policy. We do only good things. There's something wrong with those people. They just don't understand what we're about. So we need to educate them. We need to make them modern. We need to enlighten them. It's almost a racist attitude. And the second thing the U.S. did then is create its own media to try to fight back against Jazeera. They created Al Hurra TV and Radio Sawa and High Magazine. And these are going to go down in history as among the great embarrassments of American professional journalism, and really, again, another huge waste of time and money. And finally, there's a very important issue that has come up now with the Hamas election, which is, what is it that is more important to the United States? The fruits of democratic, free elections, which is what we just had in Palestine, or the ideology of pro-Israeli sentiments? What is more important, to pursue the policy of freedom and democratic and pluralistic development, which is going to result in the election of groups like Hamas, or will the United States block that process now because Hamas is antagonistic to Israel? I think this is a huge question that you as American citizens and your government have to deal with. I would urge the answer to that is that that the United States now must emerge as the third party that champions both the security of Israel and the freedom of the Arab world. And it can do so. The United States must be the party that engages the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Arabs and the Iranians, and engages everybody in a consistent policy that says that freedom and security are the rights of all the people in the Middle East, but they can only be applied if they're applied equally across the board.
On November 17, 2002, Medea Benjamin, Jody Evans, Diane Wilson, Starhawk, and some 100 other women marched through Washington, D.C. to hold a 4-month daily vigil in front of the White House. This action was to protest the Bush administration's preemptive strike upon Iraq. Code Pink was so named in response to the Bush administration's Homeland Security Defense System, whose fear-based, color-coded advisory system warned of terrorist threats. On November 17, 2002, Code Yellow and Code Red ceded to Code Pink. Code Pink alerts people of all genders to wage peace. Code Pink describes itself as a women-initiated grassroots peace and justice movement that seeks positive social change through proactive, creative protest and nonviolent direct action. In January 2005, Shannon Hardy, a Raleigh middle school teacher, formed the Triangle-based chapter with 15 women in Raleigh. Since then, Triangle Code Pink has branched out to Boone, Chapel Hill, Charlotte, Fayetteville, High Point, Knightdale, Nags Head, Salida, and Selma. Many members are actively involved in the demand for truth in recruitment practices and in the education of parents and school administrators, ramifications of the No Child Left Behind Act, and its little-known provisions for opting out and alternative service options. Code Pink, North Carolina was recently honored to be among the recipients of the 2005 Independent Weekly Indie Citizen Awards. Code Pink will be a vibrant presence at the March 18th Bring Them Home Now March and Rally in Fayetteville. Or, as Code Pink says, bling them home now.
Was pull back and say, but what is the message? Is there a common message that most of us have in this room in terms of what it is that we want to convey to the General Assembly, or how it is that we want North Carolina to be?
All of you are here because you care about something deeply. Whether you're a professional advocate or a committed volunteer or somewhere in between.
Nothing happens because it's right over there. I mean, when it happens because it's right, it is a fluke. You know, I am serious. I am serious. It's not, or let's put it this way, it's not enough to be right. You have got to be prepared. You've got to map out every single step. You've got to count your votes. And a good bill sponsor will do that. Will, work the committee, but a really good advocate and the ones who are, have the money and the resources are going to have worked the committee before you ever even see that bill, before most of the committee members even know it's coming to the committee.
You're here because you have passion, you have energy, and you have motivation and desire and drive on behalf of your issue or issues or people or beliefs. Message Madness is designed to convert that passion into usable, transformative energy.
My name is Laura Ciudad and I work with the Latin American Coalition in Charlotte, North Carolina. I got the email about the Message Madness that is being organized by Common Sense, and when I saw the topics that we were going to talk about today, it was really interesting, especially because I work with the advocacy program at the coalition that I thought that is going to help me a lot in my program.
When we're talking about the issues that brings folks here together, a woman's right to choose, abolishing the death penalty, advocating for the rights of immigrant communities, advocating for the rights of people of color, struggling for equality for the LGBT community, working for economic justice in all its forms, working to reform and improve the criminal justice system, fighting to protect and preserve our environment and natural resources, or a host of other issues, this is why we're here. This is why we're here, to learn how to get our message out.
You have brought people that really are knowledgeable over there, what they are talking about, and they are, when I saw the first panel here, they are very willing to answer your questions, and it's a very friendly environment. So
there are too many people in North Carolina that have too little and have almost nothing at all, and we've got to do something about that, and it shouldn't be, we shouldn't let the state be run by a power elite.
I think that Common Sense is doing a tremendous job. I think we all need to continue to support them. We don't have enough progressive voices in our state here, so congratulations and thank you for including us.